my name is Kaitlyn Casulli, and I'm an assistant professor and extension process specialist here at UGA in the Department of Food Science and Technology.
What is your academic background and your research focus?
So I started out at NC State as an undergraduate in food science. I actually started in research this summer before my freshman year. So I was working in a food microbiology lab, and I discovered that food microbiology wasn't really my thing. But as I've learned in my career, never say never, because now I work with microbiology. But I decided after that experience to get more into engineering. So I found a position in an engineering lab, and I got to do a lot of really cool hands-on things. So I got to work with equipment, and I got to build things. I got to really see the impact of the research as I was doing the project, as opposed to microbiology. Sometimes you can't see things directly, or you have to wait for them to happen. So engineering was really that direct impact for me. I also, ended up taking some math classes and really was steering myself into more of an engineering focus in my coursework. And that set me up when I finished up my undergraduate degree to go off to Michigan State for graduate school. So I got started in my master's program in biosystems engineering. I got to do more of the modeling and math things that I like to do while still being in the lab. So it was about, it was a lot of computer work, but it was also still all that hands-on stuff in the lab. Once I finished up my master's, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting a bartending job and also doing consulting part-time. So the consulting projects I did, one was a risk assessment for peanuts, for salmonella in peanuts. And then the other project was working with a company that does dry roasting. So they design and build these roasters for companies that want to dry roast things like tree nuts or peanuts or seeds, anything like that. They wanted to use my expertise in modeling to help them with the validation process for these roasters. So figuring out how much of a microorganism is actually killed off in this process. So that was both really good experiences that helped set me up for what I wanted to do with my PhD. So after doing that for about a year, I decided to go back for the PhD again at Michigan State. So I got to do a lot more of the modeling part of it and heat transfer aspects of it. I worked with peanuts. Ironically, that was kind of, I did the risk assessment in peanuts, so I decided to kind of take that next step into doing a bit more of the modeling related to peanuts, so I could tie those projects together in a way. And that's kind of what led me to UGA, was those opportunities I took during my PhD to travel and network and meet people. So after I finished up my PhD, I decided that UGA was the place to be, and somehow landed the job before I defended my dissertation. But yeah, it really was. It seemed at the time like not a logical pathway. I felt like I was jumping around all over the place, but it really goes to show you that you're going to end up where you need to be based on what your experiences are.
What is your role in our extension office?
So I am, my appointment is 70% extension and 30% research. So part of that is to integrate the extension and research components. So I really, in my extension role, I work with companies a lot that want to process a product to make it shelf stable. So a lot of those products are what we call acidified products, where they're combining things that are naturally have acids in them, and then other foods that don't have acids in them. So for example, if you have barbecue sauce, people are taking things like vinegars and mixing them in with peppers and onions and tomatoes and things like that. So we help them design their process. One of my roles here is as the process authority. So I will help them with product testing and evaluation to see what factors in those foods are going to help make them shelf stable, and then what process can we apply to actually ensure the safety and the shelf stability of that food. So that's probably the bulk of what I do in extension. As I mentioned, I have a research program as well, so that extension really informs what I do with research. So one of my graduate students is going to be doing a project on, determining how microbes are inactivated when you don't heat a product. So if you have something that has enough acids in it and those acids can kill off bacteria, how does that actually translate to, what parameters do we need to set on that product to ensure its safety? So that's a bit of how that works out. And then in terms of other extension activities I do quite a few workshops. So we have workshops that help people get in compliance with regulations as they're processing their food. And the regulations are important to make sure you're complying with them, because if you do not comply with the regulations, then you could get shut down. So it's important for people to know about that.
Tell me about some of the different types of workshops and trainings that we offer through Extension Food Science.
Yeah, so the main workshop that I kind of organize and run is called Better Process Control School, and that is for people who have one of those acidified foods like I was talking about with barbecue sauces and other types of foods that they want to make shelf stable. So that actually helps people understand what factors go into the food to make it shelf stable, how to formulate the foods, how to process the foods, and if they're doing something that does not have acids in it, so something that is either has a very low level of acid or just no acids at all, it's a very neutral kind of food. They have to go through a specialized process called retort canning, where basically you apply pressure and temperature to help get that food above a boiling point to kill off spores that could germinate and grow and produce a toxin in that food if it wasn't processed properly. So this workshop helps them understand some of the equipment operating parameters, formulations, how to make something shelf stable. And then some of the other ones that we do are so hazard analysis and critical control points training, HACCP training, as we call it. This is required for things like juices, meat and poultry, seafood. Other companies choose to comply with these regulations anyway, because while they don't have to based on a regulation, it's always a good thing to kind of figure out where your hazards are in your process and how you're controlling those hazards, either with thermal process or some other kind of process to reduce these hazards. And then the other one that we do quite a lot is called PCQI, and that stands for Preventive Controls Qualified Individual. And this trains people. It's very similar to HACCP in the sense that you're thinking about hazards, but you're really thinking about hazards in a broader sense. So instead of just focusing on biological, chemical, and physical hazards within the facility, you're really broadening it out to include things like sanitation, supply chain, allergens. So just taking that bigger snapshot of what the food looks like as it's coming into your company, and then as it leaves your company, what are you doing to control and document hazards? We also do a few that I'm not quite as familiar with. My colleague really leads those. So Produce Safety Alliance has one for complying with the produce safety rule. That is one that we do quite often. We also have water systems workshops, so focusing more on water and processing environments and how to control hazards and keep that water fresh and sanitary for food processing. So that's a bit about what we do kind of regularly. We also sometimes have special workshops. So we might have someone approach us and say, can you do a workshop on sanitation for aseptic processing? And, then we would design a workshop like that. So one workshop that I actually designed and ran a couple of weeks ago is a brewing workshop. So I noticed that a lot of people have the technical background, so they understand how to brew beer, how to produce it and do it in a sanitary way. There's also a good amount of resources on things like legal and funding. So the gap I really noticed was things like creating culture in your tap room, doing things like creating impact on small budgets, understanding the market of beer processing and how to expand your offerings to include more clientele. So, you know, you get the one that comes in and doesn't really like beer. Well, how do you really attract a broader audience and expand your selections in a brew house? So that was a lot of fun. And then the participants actually got to go around Athens. So we rented a couple of vans and shuttled them around Athens to visit 6 of our breweries. So we've got a range of scales from very small 2-barrel brew houses to you know, 100+ brew houses with Terrapin and Creature Comforts. You know, so it's or scale from your neighborhood brew house all the way up to distribution and mass producing beer. So it's really cool to just kind of show everybody all those aspects and give them really hands-on experience with how they could scale their breweries.
Why is it important for our department to offer workshops like this?
Yeah, so I think there was a statistic thrown around a few years back that food is the second most regulated thing in the country behind nuclear power. So I've always thought that was very interesting, how many regulations and things that we have to comply with. And, you know, even with all my training and experience, I go through and I read the regulation and it's still, you know, it's clear as mud to a lot of people. So people really don't, you know, get exactly what they need just by reading a regulation. So it's easier for us to bring them in and give them a hands-on workshop. So you know, we have a combination of lectures for our workshop. So lectures on, you know, kind of telling them what the regulation says, what you have to do, and translating that to a level that people like me or, you know, anyone can understand, even without advanced training in some of these areas. So I think it's just helpful to break these out and get that understanding and what are the basics that you have to meet. And then for some of them, we also had them run through how to build a HACCP plan, how to build a food safety plan. So that's really important, I think, to get that hands-on experience as well of thinking through what kind of things we have to identify for complying with these regulations and how to document that. It also helps us to be able to connect with these, you know, these clients one-on-one. So that way, you know, they're coming out, they're taking our workshop, they're meeting us in person. We generally try and get everyone from the extension team to participate in the workshop in some way. So we have that face-to-face exposure. And I think that just opens up the door for them to later come to us when they need help with something, whether that's a process approval or helping them develop a HACCP plan or something completely different with product development.